Right, I've started the recording. If everyone can note that today's meeting will be recorded and this recording may be broadcast on the authority's internet. All attendees will be in view of the camera and by attending are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings. Item 1 on the agenda is the appointment of Chair of the Committee. The person appointed as Chair of the Committee must be a lay member. May I now invite nominations for the appointment of Chair of the Governance and Audit Committee? Is there a nomination for Chair?
If I put my electronic hand up, I'll put my real hand up as well. We three lay members had a conversation in one of the training days we had before starting this role. We realised that it was going to be one of us three, and the conversation was that Bob Williams, whilst he's been a member of the committee in the past, that didn't want to stand. And Sue, I don't put words in your mouth, but I think between us we agreed that I should be a chair, at least in the original, at least going forward. We'll always have the opportunity to change it in the next municipal year, I guess.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Thanks for that. That's great.
Right, so is there a seconder for that proposal?
I'll check and add it.
Okay, that's Councillor Davis, is there?
Yeah.
Right. Right, if we can take it to the vote then, please. Are there any other nominations? No? So if we can vote on the nomination that Mr. Martin Veal be Chair of the committee. Yes, I can see that that's carried. So Mr. Veal is appointed as Chair. Okay, thank you. So if you want to take the Chair.
Thank you for handing the reins over. Thank you very much. And I guess it's probably worth me just saying very quickly before we get into the substantial business of the meeting, I've got some substantial boots to fill with Councillor Clive Jones, who I've known for, gosh, getting on for 40 years, I guess. So I fully understand the contribution he's made to this committee in the past, and I just hope that we can do as well. Just to say, obviously not everyone's face is on screen, so raising actual hands might be tricky. So if you can raise your yellow hand as well, I've got a more of a fighting chance of spotting people and make sure I bring you in. Item 2 on the agenda, therefore, is the appointment of a vice chair. This doesn't have the same restrictions, so this can be a councillor or a lay member. And so I'm happy to receive any nominations. Again, rather as a newbie here, I'm not quite sure how many of the committee members here have experience of being on this committee and how many are new, and whether that influences any decisions. I'm not seeing any hands up. Sue.
Sue has a hand, Chair.
Hi, Martin. Hi, and everybody. I put my hand up. I'm happy to be vice chair if members would be happy with that nomination. I haven't got my camera on today. I'm afraid. I've just had COVID over the weekend, so I'm here in person. But unfortunately, I won't be putting my camera on as just not feeling 100%. But yeah, and in this particular item, I'm happy to sort of nominate myself as vice chair. If that's
Thank
if
you.
anybody else would like to nominate, that's fine.
Thank you for that, Sue. Councillor Gibbs.
Hi, thanks, Chair. In the absence of no further nominations, I would like to second Sue's request to become Vice Chair. Thanks,
Okay.
Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gibbs. Are there any other nominations? Okay, I don't feel there's a stampede here. So should we take that? We'll move forward with the nomination of Sue Erickson as Vice Chair. Put it to a vote. You'll press your yellow hands. That feels like that's comfortably carried as well. Thank you. Moving on to the more substantial business as we go ahead now. Next item is apologies for absence, and I believe there's at least one, which was Councillor Brent Carter. And I think Bob Williams, one of the lay members, hasn't attended either. So we'll note those 2 apologies then. Turning my page anyway. Item 4, declaration of interest. This is for members to declare any personal or prejudicial interests. You all know the rules by now. We've been trained sufficiently since May, I'm sure. Does anyone have any declarations specific to today's agenda they wish to raise? And I see no hands, which is excellent news. Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to the first big chunk of business in the meeting, and it's the annual risk management progress report and updated corporate risk register. Apologies for me not being an expert on knowing who's going to be leading on this, but is it going to be Matthew? Matthew, are you here? Yes.
Good afternoon, all. Councillor Barry was due to take it, Chair, but I've had apologies from Councillor Barry this morning as well.
So I can't remember. Okay, we'll make sure we note that apologies as well, and thank you, Matthew.
But Andrew Mogford's here as well as Head of Service for Policy Improvement. He'll be taking the report further forward, Chair.
Brilliant.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Matthew. Okay, so I won't go through all the details of the report, and I apologise in advance, really. It is quite a substantial report. However, we're in a position where we are updating our strategy policy document, as well as perhaps catching up on our closure of our risk register last year. Due to the pre-election period, this is the only meeting we could bring it to, which fitted within the timescales. So the report is split into 3 parts. The annual risk report for 21-22, the corporate risk register as at March 2022, and the draft risk strategy policy. Please note there are no changes in the risk scores over the last 6 months, and when I say that, I mean between September and March. However, we did see 3 changes within last year over those 12 months, and they were reduction in capacity staff losses, compliance, which you probably remember as governance risk, and performance. The review of the risk service really across the organisation is continuing. We're trying to improve all our governance areas, and risk falls into that. Our operational and service risk registers are formally reviewed twice a year at least. That's with Matthew in attendance at those meetings. But please note they are live documents and get reviewed on a regular basis, with escalation processes put in place should those risks need to be escalated. And we also take risks on a regular basis to service management boards and our corporate management team and our senior leadership team meetings. Corporate level risks are becoming far more robust, or that's our belief, and having feedback from a recent swap audit that reflects that. We'd embed in the level of risk discussion really across the organisation around the changes, talking about our risk maturity, and also in terms of better description of risk and therefore better mitigation of risk. We hold regular workshops with our CMT and Cabinet, and will continue to do so. And we're also taking our risk strategy and policy to scrutiny as a workshop over the next coming weeks. And Chair, the offer, as I said in the training, is there if we want a workshop with the Governance and Audit Committee at any time. The offer's there to go through the strategy and policy in more detail than allowed in a meeting like this.
Well, we'll try and take that offline and have a conversation with that. Thank you, Andrea.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chair. And then finally on this point, as I said, we're introducing the actual target risks as opposed to reference to target risks under the new policy and strategy, so we can be far more focused in our description and our understanding of risks, particularly at a corporate level. As I alluded to earlier, we've had 2 swap audits, our initial audit and a follow-up audit, where we've strengthened where we were. We were reasonable in both, but we're moving towards substantial.
Can I just check one thing? SWAP, I guess it stands for something like South Wales something or other. But
well, that's a good question. We couldn't actually find it in the report. Mark, I'm sure, will give the definition, but SWAP work as part of our internal auditors. So, okay. Mark, do you want to clarify what SWAP stands for? Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I couldn't find it in the report either. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, we've used SWAP a couple of times to do some audits on our behalf because we've had some vacancies. So this was one of the pieces of work that they've done. historically it stood for South West Audit Partnership as opposed to South Wales. So close, but they're Southwest, based on the southwest of England. But they do quite a bit of work across the public sector, generally in England and a little bit in Wales as well. But they've dropped the southwest bit. They just call themselves SWAP. That's why you couldn't find it anyway. I think they've sort of dropped the sort of historic full name, if you feel like. So,
but it's a contracted service. We buy them in as a service.
Yeah, yeah. I'll touch on it in the annual report, Chair. But yeah, we buy them in through a framework or through a tender process, and we use them periodically, not substantially, but we use them from time to time for specific pieces of work when needed. So that was one of the pieces of work that they did.
That's helpful, Mark. That's sorry, Andrew, for interrupting your flow, but this is how to keep people on their toes, isn't
it? No problem at all. Thank you, Chair. So as I said, we had no priority one recommendations in either the audit or the follow-up audit. We had, I believe it was 6 recommendation 2s in the first audit, which have all now been actioned. We have 2 priority 3 recommendations going forward, which this report will cover off those. Part of our ongoing, as I mentioned, our continuous improvement around governance. If appropriate, through Mark, we would like to invite SWAP back at a later point in the year to make sure we are improving and we are embedding the outcomes of both the policy strategy document and the audit. We've substantially, I think, improved our training, and I say I think because we need to see what the outcomes of that are in terms of against our outcomes. So we've got far more e-learning opportunities, particularly for members, which will be rolled out shortly. We've got a member workshop specific to risk where us and our insurers are taking that workshop over the next couple of weeks. We'll also be doing the same with co-opted members quite shortly after that. We've run and continuing to run workshops at an operational and a management level as part of our Merthyr Manager work stream, which fits under HR. We have increased our membership to Alarm, and Matthew and a few others are undertaking various levels of IRM training, Institute of Risk Management training. And as I say, all of that's being captured then and reinforced on an annual basis through our e-learning opportunities, and where appropriate then additional material is being shared with members and officers. And finally, if I may, Chair, just to touch on the changes to the strategy and policy document, the main enhancements are around opportunity risks, risk categories and risk appetite, and target risks. Where we'll be looking to take the report to the September Council for approval, and as I said earlier, following challenge today and scrutiny prior to that. And just very quickly then, around the purpose of the exercise, even though nothing has changed substantially, and we have been updating as we've been going the processes which sit below the document, I think it's come from this committee and elsewhere that we needed to perhaps be more precise around our risk categories and therefore be able to better define a risk appetite. So what I mean by that is, rather than saying the council is open to risk, well, we'd like to think we are in some areas, but rightfully so not in others, like safeguarding. So what we've looked at within the document is, rather than coming up with a statement, coming up with perhaps an explanation of what our risk appetite is, where we are open and eager to take in risk and where we're obviously not. And something, as Matthew alluded to in previous meetings for this committee, is around that target risk, where we do actually look at what our target risk could look like against what our mitigation actions are, and therefore be more meaningful in what the success of those mitigation actions could be. So I apologise in advance, Chair, for taking up some time with that, but I've looked at some of those points and thought perhaps to bring them to the forefront of the Chair and the committee. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Andrew. That's really helpful by way of explaining. But again, apologies for the drilling in the background. It's this is the joys of home working, I guess. Yeah, I think that was really helpful just to set the scene for this, because obviously at least 2 of the lay members are new to this committee, and I suspect a number of the councillors as well. So assuming a level of knowledge is a dangerous thing here, Andrew. So I think it's really helpful to give us a sort of a talk through in terms of that. The best way to do this is to go through it piece by piece, I guess, because there's quite a lot of information here. just by way of introduction, I thought there was quite a bit of duplication here, and I thought the policy was a pretty long policy. I don't think I've ever seen one as long as that, but there we are. We'll stay with it. My first kind of question is on Appendix 1, which is page 5 of the bundle, is the risk register, which lists those 11 risks, and you rightly point out that nothing's changed since September 2021. I kind of wonder what's the process for reviewing, and is it every 6 months they looked at and review? Because, for example, I would have thought that COVID as a risk is a very dynamic risk, and that would be moving. And I suspect Brexit would probably be moving as well, but clearly not. I wonder if you could just talk through a little bit of the process and why they are sticking where they are. And yeah, so go for it.
Okay, so if I break that answer down into a few pieces, if I may, Chair. So that's at a point in time as at March, where you rightly pick up it's a 6-month review. Something myself and Matthew and the portfolio member have discussed is moving to quarterly reporting, particularly with as you rightly say, impacts of COVID. The climate change is potentially going to be considered now as a risk going forward, along with some of those other risks where perhaps it would be more beneficial to look at the trend data within year per quarter and then annually compare those quarters then when we become more mature in doing so. So that is something we are looking at and bringing those to the audit committee. I should say governance and audit committee on a quarterly basis, provided that you as chair and the committee want that. But the information would be there to provide to the committee in any ways. The other thing is to provide that information back through in a cabinet report on a quarterly basis. But just to reassure people, we don't wait for that quarter or that 6 months to come up before raising any risk. If a risk is raised at any level, there's an escalation process in place where that would find itself either onto the operational risk register or the corporate risk register, depending upon the risk score and the severity of that risk. So we don't wait until a particular point in time. So just to clarify the first picture, it's at a point in time, that report, and even between writing that report and now, where we're looking at Q1, there will be changes going forward, which we'll bring to the committee in due course.
Okay, that's really helpful to understand, and I think you hinted at the hierarchy of risk registers. You mentioned operational risk register, and I presume there's a number of risk registers which sit beneath this one, which this committee doesn't necessarily see. So I just, for me anyways, as a newbie here, just be helpful to understand what the hierarchy is and how those are individually managed within service areas. I guess they're brigaded by service areas, and then how things bubble up, and then on the other hand, move down the system as well. So that'd be helpful to understand that, Andrew, if you could. Yeah,
okay. So you're right in your assumption, Chair. They do sit within the service areas, and Matthew on a cycle basis meets with the risk owners at least twice a year, but they are live documents. So those risk operational and service risk registers are used on a daily basis, weekly basis, whatever's required. Matthew then offers challenge and advice at least twice a year, as I've said. If any of the scores go above 12, we consider at the minute, we then consider whether those are included or need to be included in the risk register, but that would be escalated to the director and then passed to CMT. An example would be potentially around COVID, as you mentioned there, even though it is scoring highly now. If there was a change and it was to go down, but something was to happen, it could go back up, and that would come through the operational risk register, through to the corporate risk register. So what we are trying to really embed as well is that risk is considered on a service management basis. So when they have their sometimes quarterly, sometimes monthly, depends on the directorate, that risk features on the management board agenda. So as Matthew have said in previous meetings, we don't look at risks in isolation. They are considered as part of that management tool alongside performance and alongside other things. So to summarise, Chair, the operational risk registers are used by the service managers on a regular basis, at least twice a year, challenged by Matthew, and anything then 12 over is escalated to the director, and if needed, will appear then on the corporate risk register.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you, Andrew. Trying to understand that. And just in the paper, it talks about a rolling program of updates. So I presume that in the past, individual managers have come to Governance and Audit Committee just to talk about specific risks that are there and how things are moving and whether they need our help, I guess, in lubricating the system, perhaps. I see lots of nods. Yes. So is there a program already in train in terms of what's going to be coming to this committee going forward, or is that something we need to discuss?
Yes and no, Chair. I think
that's always the best answer.
I'm not going to sit on the fence too much, but no. So in terms of our register, our risk register, at least twice a year we've brought that to the committee. Once at the end of the financial year, and then once then halfway through, which we've called a highlight report. If we move to quarterly reporting, obviously the risk register itself will come 4 times a year, you know, and can be looked at in as ever much depth as the committee see fit. But we also bring a performance report, and we will, under the new legislation, have to this committee in terms of our self-assessment report. So performance being on our risk register, I'd like to think that by addressing our performance and our self-assessment report, we mitigate the actions put within the risk register itself. And Steve also brings several reports to the committee regarding the finance, which will address the 2 finance risks. But what I would suggest then is if you're happy, Chair, to look at that forward plan and perhaps bring some of those other risks to the committee. And I know, Mark, that SWAP again are doing a deep dive into 3 of our corporate risks, and no doubt we'll bring that back to this committee at some point as well.
That'll be helpful, and a neat segue to bring Mark in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was just Andrew's already touched on it. There's a forward work programme, the last item on the agenda today. So the annual risk management report and corporate risk register was obviously on the agenda for today. The next line on the forward work programme is update on corporate risks, and it says frequency quarterly, but we haven't actually said when these reports will come forward. So,
yeah.
So following on from Andrew's sort of point about maybe reporting quarterly, once if that is agreed, then we can have a conversation then when's the best time to sort of fit those in and what format that perhaps can follow. I know in years gone by, if there's we've had the relevant sort of risk holder, if you like, at the senior level coming in to say where they are in terms of managing some significant risks, or the committee might say, well, we'd like an update on risk A, B or C, maybe rather than all of them. And then to program that in, so the committee has a sense of what is happening and how things are being dealt with.
Thank you, Mark. I mean, without prejudging the committee as a whole, I mean, it feels logical that we pick up the ones which are coloured black, which is even worse than red, which is cyber attack, school attainment, and COVID and homelessness. They're the top 4, aren't they? So it kind of feels logical that would be the way we'd start. But Sue, I can see your hand is up.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I was just looking at page 15 on the actual corporate register, and I was just wondering whether it might be useful to include how the risks are being treated, or actually the responses would be, whether it be one of those 4 T's, you know, treat, tolerate, and so forth that you referred to in earlier in the report. I just wondered what members' thoughts were on that, really.
Yeah, Sue, that makes a lot of sense. In terms of just seeing the headline doesn't give us an awful lot of assurance in terms of anything happening. So, yeah, I would expect to see something along the lines of, these are things we've done, and these are things we've planned, and this is the date we're planning to do it. And if we do those things, then the score will be reduced to X minus. That'll be helpful to see that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Andrew, go on. Yes.
Just to give assurances, but we'll confirm in future reports, so that does sit within the register, the complete full corporate risk register. And that is something we look into strengthen as well in terms of our mitigation and being as meaningful as we can be. And yes, Chair, by all means, if you and the committee are happy to receive that, we'll include that in our quarterly reports.
That'd be really helpful, I think, just to understand that here. So it's helpful to tell the committee we have a risk. We know it's a significant risk. We intend to do X, Y, and Z to address it, and that'll be addressed within X number of months. So in X number of months' time, we should see some downward travel. I mean, that's really helpful. That would help us really have assurance that the system is working. That's really helpful. Thank you, Andrew. I'll progress down through the bundles. That was the risk register problem. We're looking at the main kind of policy, what's it called, the corporate risk register document proper, which is the 23 pages. So I'm on page, Sue said we're on page 15, and we keep on going down through there. If anyone's got any specific issues they want to raise, please say, or I'll end up kind of hogging the meeting, I'm afraid. Let's just quickly scroll down to my next one. Oh, this is just a typo, which is on page 23. That's, which says headed up section 9. It says recovery, transformation, and recovery. And of course, I learned my crash course in acronyms. I learned it's RTI, not RTR. So yes, that's one just to amend. Going down further, when we get to, and here's the risk register yet again on page 28 and 29. It feels to me like this document could be a lot shorter, but okay, pick that up where we are. Okay, that's then the risk register document itself. Then the next document is the risk management strategy policy. Anyone any specific issues they want to pick up on that? For me, I was just trying to understand the standing. Where are we in this? Because there's some really helpful appendices in here, and some feel like generic appendices. But then when we get to, as you alluded to, Andrew, a risk appetite, it looks like that's our real risk appetite. And am I correct in assuming that? I'm trying to find the page. The risk appetite is on page 52. So that statement, it's headed up our risk appetite statements. Is that actually the council's? Is that proposed? Has it been adopted? What's the standing of that page?
Okay. So let me just find the page, Chair. Is it page 52 of the bundle?
Page 52 of the bundle. It's got 47 in blue in the bottom corner. That makes sense. It's one of the various appendices.
I missed that, Chair. Sorry, what was the bit in blue at the bottom?
It says 47. It's page 47 of the policy, but 52 of the bundle. Okay,
I'm just getting to that.
Right, okay. It's headed up our risk appetite statements.
Yes, so that is our overall risk appetite, Chair. Yes.
So that's been signed up to. Is that been in place? Is that agreed by? Was that the draft?
So yeah, so this is the draft. Previously, we had a more high level statement which was linked to our PESTEL model, which we adopted for our risk categories. However, when we've looked at the detail behind how we want to move forward in our understanding of risk, we've moved to the Orange Book approach to risk categorization. And the Orange Book is the national risk advice, I guess, for local authorities. So we've adopted that, albeit we've adapted it to fit with Merthyr. This is part of the process to adopt that then as a policy and strategy. So we've always had a risk appetite statement and a risk appetite risk category risk categorization tool. What we look into is move to this new tool to give us more detail on this new definition of risk appetite, so that we can be clear as to where our appetite is more open and eager, and where it's more close to taking risks.
Yeah, and I think as a statement, it's really good because it gives that nuance. You can't say we're risk averse or we're risk sort of hungry. It's a really nuanced position. I think it's a really good statement. That's really helpful. Thank you. Anyone else got any issues on this document before we move on to the appendices to it? Again, most of my questions come out of ignorance, and hopefully they will therefore dry up over time as I know more about it. So I'm going to go on to page 67 of the bundle, which is the blue 62 in the bottom corner, and it's headed up Appendix 6 example, and it's a assurance mapping, and it's obviously an example that's come from the NHS, and it's a really helpful one. And I just wondered, is it the intention to be developing this kind of assurance mapping for across all the services in the council?
Okay, so it's one of the tools, as you rightly say, that we've looked at when we've done our benchmarking on how approaches to risk management have been done. Rather than perhaps take a blanket approach to saying we're going to do it in every area, it may be more applicable to some areas, particularly those which fit with that kind of risk, because we've also highlighted some other models which would be perhaps beneficial for other service areas. So we're not necessarily taking a blanket approach to everything, Chair, but where that would add value and be beneficial to mitigate those risks within areas, yes, we would then look to adopt that.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Andrew. That's I think that's it from me. I'm looking around for any hands and I don't see any. So just remind us quickly about next steps. Where does this go from here?
Okay.
And are you asking us to formally approve this or just to note it?
So right. So if I answer the first bit first, we're looking at taking this to scrutiny for a workshop around our overarching scrutiny committee, because it does form a key part of our governance, and again welcome feedback from that. We've also got feedback from various other parties from our peers across Alarm, which we remember, along with our insurers. So all of that is being brought together. There's nothing earth-shattering from that feedback. But again, we'll use the input from this committee again and the workshop, the scrutiny workshop. Remember when we said in the training, this is more helicopter type view of scrutiny, whereas the scrutiny committee itself perhaps can look at that lower level in terms of how we apply the policy and strategy. And then with all that in mind, we plan to take it to council for approval in September. And then on the back of that council approval, we look to implement the outcome of the policy and strategy. And finally, Chair, I think the recommendation stated within the report then ask for you to note and debate the contents of the report, and we can provide any feedback then from this committee into the decision-making process when we take it to council.
Okay, I feel like we've noted and debated. Before we wrap up, though, Councillor Gibbs, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. And Andrew, just for new members like myself on this actual committee, can you just explain who or what Alarm are, please?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, Councillor, I should have explained that in the introduction. So Alarm are a national risk organisation that support various sectors, particularly local authorities, in everything really. And as a member, whether it's been benchmarking, access to specific reports, various training opportunities. So being a member of that body, we do have access then to all of these kind of things, and part of that is that they allocate a mentor to the local authority and the risk officer within the local authority, so that obviously we can share best practice. So Alarm is a body which supports local authorities and others in the development and implementation of risk.
Good work. And it actually stands for the Association of Local Authority Risk Managers. So, well, obviously Alarm. So yeah, thank you.
I was going to say, Chair, I wasn't going to ask him to explain the acronym, but thank you for that anyway. One final question on that, Chair. I take it we have taken up the opportunity of mentoring, and
yes, absolutely. So our mentor is part of an English local authority, and it's nice to have an input from other local authorities as well as outside of Wales. Yes, we have taken that up, Councillor, and they have and are providing feedback into the work that we do in. And the mentor we've been allocated is well renowned within the risk world, having won I think 3 awards at the recent annual award ceremony. So very lucky to have that peer support.
Excellent. That's really good news, Andrew. And as a councillor, it does provide me with a lot of assurance. Not that you're not doing a good job anyway, but it's nice to have a fresh set of eyes in the background. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I think there's two elements there. There's that, absolutely, and then the external assessment that's coming in through SWAP, as we know. And I know that doesn't stand for anything, but that's really helpful. Those two elements are really helpful to sort of give us that assurance, which is, after all, what we as a committee are after. Excellent. I think we are asked to note that, and we understand the next steps. And I guess, Andrew, you can just give us a feedback loop next time around to see where it's gone and how it progressed through the rest of the organisation. Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to agenda item 6, which is the internal.
Can we take, sorry to interrupt, Chair, can we take a vote on the recommendations in the report?
I thought we were asked to note. Were we not asked to note? So the recommendations, good grief. Okay, I shall with the recommendation in section 2 of the report, note and debate, note the content, invites future attendance. We've said we've discussed that and we note. Are we content to note? I didn't think we needed a vote on noting. Can I get some correction on that? Do we vote on everything?
It is a recommendation, Chair, that we, progress it to cabinet or progress to council. It's on the.
Okay, then are we content to agree with the recommendations in the paper as set out in section 2.0? Do we put a show of hands? Yeah. Rather than
carried, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, due process, understanding how local government works. That's helpful. It's a long time. It's a long time since I was there. Okay, now we'll move on to Mark. Sorry for sort of making you pause there, but we've got your annual report.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to say I've got Lisa Cumston, who's the recently appointed audit manager for Merthyr Tydfil and Rhondda Cynon Taf as well, and Lisa will be presenting a few of the later reports. And also got Helen Harbord, who a number of members will be familiar with. Helen supports us as well and the committee, and Helen was appointed as an assistant audit manager for Merthyr and RCT as well. So hopefully if I'm stumped on any questions, or they can help me out on hopefully. Okay, thank you all. Yeah, this is the annual internal audit report for 21-22, as it says on the title. It's the most important report of the year from an internal audit perspective, and meets a number of requirements, and I'll highlight what they are as I go through the report. But before taking members through the report, I'd like to thank Lisa and Helen and the wider team for the work they have done this year to enable this report to be produced and the opinion to be presented to the committee this afternoon. Taken on board is a number of new members who joined this committee. It might be worth going through this report in a little bit more detail than we'll do in future years, and until you are more familiar. But if I'm going too slow, please shout, and I'll try and speed up. But try not to take too much time. But I will try and cover the ground in a little bit of depth if everybody's happy with that. That being the case, I'll just take members through each section of the report, and then I'll maybe highlight key parts of the appendix as well that contains the detail. So firstly, then, section 3 of the covering report, which is page 6, I think it is, in your agenda pack. 3.1 there states the public sector internal audit standards require the head of internal audit to provide an annual report to support the annual governance statement, which is obviously part of the later item, which will be presented by Steve, I believe. And the standards state that the report, the annual internal audit report, should include an opinion on the adequacy and effectiveness of the council's framework of governance, risk management and internal control, include an opinion on the adequacy and effectiveness of the council's framework. That's repeated, so I don't need to say that twice. Present a summary of the audit work undertaken, draw attention to any issues that may impact on the level of assurance provided, provide a summary of the performance of the service, and comment on any conformance issues in relation to the public sector internal audit standards. So that's basically setting up broadly what the public sector internal audit standards say in terms of the annual report. So the paragraphs then following on from that go into a bit more detail, but just as a way of recap there, 3.3 3, the draft audit plan for internal audit for 21-22 was approved by the committee on the 21st of June 2021. The plan was flexible to be able to respond to changing circumstances and events that may occur during the year as a result of the pandemic, remote ways of working and other things that may occur. Audit work has been carried out remotely during the year with staff predominantly working from home. Audits have been conducted using various digital solutions, and whilst there was a steep learning curve both for audit staff and auditees, particularly in the first year of the pandemic, everyone's adjusted well to this way of working. Moving on to section 4 in terms of key issues for consideration, paragraph 4.1 there. The annual internal audit annual report at Appendix A summarises the reviews undertaken during 21-22, the recommendations made and any control issues identified. A total of 19 reviews are completed with an audit opinion and a total of 103 recommendations made. A detailed breakdown of those is included as Annex 1, and I'll get to that relevant part a bit later on. The report also discusses the performance of the team and the service during the year, including benchmarking its performance against other local authorities and highlighting individual staff development and training that has taken place. Progress against the plan is attached at Annex 2, so members can see there the pieces of work that are identified, which ones that we've done and the opinions given and so on, and ones that perhaps we haven't done. So that sets out there. But there are a number of reviews and pieces of work that don't necessarily give an opinion, but they do take quite a bit of time from the team. For example, coordinating the annual governance statement, update of counter-fraud policies, undertaking work in relation to National Fraud Initiative, for example. Annex 2 illustrates that many planned audit reviews have been undertaken during the year, despite the continuing impact of the pandemic on different services and the different ways of working. Where planned work has not been undertaken, assurance has been gained where possible from other sources, such as previous work and coverage in other audits. Some planned reviews were not undertaken during the year due to requests from services that were under intense pressure, and that being the case in some instances, they'll be considered in this current financial year and roll forward. Based on the testing of the effectiveness of the internal control environment, an audit opinion of substantial assurance has been given to 6 reviews, which is 32%. An opinion of reasonable to 9 reviews, 47%, and 3 reviews were given an opinion of limited assurance, and 1 review was given an opinion of no assurance. And the detail of those are included in the annual report, and that's been the practice that any areas of concern, we highlight some of the detail in relation to those. And anybody who's been on the committee previously will recall that either services have attended the committee to sort of say where they are in relation to issues that we've raised in those particular reports, or at least they will have seen some of the detail previously. Paragraph 4.5 there, taking into account the results of the internal reviews completed in 21-22 and the recommendations made and considering other sources of assurance. The head of internal audit's annual opinion on the adequacy and effectiveness of the council's framework of governance, risk management and internal control for 21-22 is of reasonable assurance. So that's perhaps the highlight really, that I'm giving an opinion of reasonable assurance over the overall framework. No significant cross-cutting control issues have been identified that would impact on the council's overall control environment, and the weaknesses identified are service specific. So that's the headline really for members to take away from this, but there'll be a bit of a breakdown later on in the full report. And then there's the health warning, I suppose, just to say that in providing an annual opinion, it should be noted that assurance can never be absolute. The most that internal audit can provide is a reasonable assurance that there are no major weaknesses in risk management, governance and control processes. So just stating, but perhaps what you all already know, but sometimes you have to say these things. So I'm happy to pause there for a second in case there are any questions, but I was going to go through the appendix in a little bit, not the whole thing, you'll be pleased to know, but flag up certain things really that perhaps members need to be made aware of, and some of the detail.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. That's a helpful point to pause, just to sort of get our sort of heads on this. You're absolutely right. And one of the things I noted with the language we use in terms of our assurance categories, there's no such thing as full assurance anymore, because our internal audit would be foolish, wouldn't they, to sort of commit to everything's rosy. So substantial means we're pretty good, reasonable means we're okay, limited is like below the line, and no assurance is frankly pretty terrible, I guess, isn't it? And that's why that's a rare occasion, and absolutely should be a rare occasion. That's
Yeah.
really helpful to understand that. I guess, Mark, it is worth just talking us through the actual report itself in a bit of detail.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Good. Good. Thank you, Chair, and that summarises section 2 really for me. So thank you very much for that. And you can see there on in table 1 is the breakdown: substantial, reasonable, limited, and no assurance, and a definition really as a guide of what we mean. So exactly as the Chair said, we don't say full assurance because I don't think that's very wise or helpful, because you can never give 100% full assurance. But substantial or reasonable is what we are looking for. Limited means that there are a few gaps that need to be tightened up, things need to be improved, and it's not very often we give a no assurance report, but we have this year, and that's one of the ones that we've mentioned later on in the report. And there, table 2 gives the breakdown that I gave in narrative form earlier, so you can see those in terms of numbers and percentage. Just, you know, so overall it's 79% was substantial or reasonable, which is a pretty high percentage, but obviously the areas identified for limited and no assurance are the ones that need to be improved. Yeah, and perhaps in terms of the opinion categorization in table 1, we reviewed those leading up to last year, because as part of the shared service, obviously we had different internal audit teams coming from different authorities, and we were all using slightly different terminology and language. So we took the opportunity to review those, and as did by coincidence CIPFA were doing the same thing at a similar time, and we'd taken the view to use that terminology, and as we decided that, they'd updated their guidance as well, and we adopted their definition, so that fitted pretty well as well. So so there we go. Moving on to section 3, which is the limited and no assurance reports that I referred to earlier. I'll take, if there are any questions on this, rather than going through the full details, the first one, the property maintenance inspection plans and regimes, that was the one that we give a no assurance report on because of things that we were concerned about, and we highlighted as part of the audit. The service was aware of a number of these things, and they were in the process of addressing them. I think it's fair to say that, but nevertheless, things weren't as anybody would want them to be. The service was invited and came into a previous meeting to say where they were in relation to these recommendations, and I think it's fair to say the progress was being made, but the committee requested, and it's the way that we work anyway, anything that's been given limited or no assurance, we include that as a follow-up audit the following year, or even in year, depending on the timing. So we will undertake a follow-up audit on this and come back to the committee on where we were, so the committee can decide if anything else needs to be done, because it is an important area. Whilst things nothing serious had happened, I think there was plenty of scope for things to have gone wrong, but luckily things are being addressed, and we will come back to members of the committee in due course on that one. Another piece of work, the next 3 I think are all limited rather than no assurance, so it's about improving and tightening things up. So it was about the overall arrangements for managing school private funds, so we made a number of recommendations there that the service have taken on board. Particular issues at Goitre Primary School, lots of different issues there. So we did an audit previously. So we've done a follow-up very recently and issued that report. Is still limited assurance. We've made some further recommendations, but I know there's particular support going in for that particular school from ESIS as well, and a number of wider issues. So it's in conjunction with the wider issues, but that was another area of concern. And then the vehicles fuel system, which starts on paragraph 3.9. Again, the service were asked to come into the committee to explain where they were on this one. I think some progress has been made. The service didn't accept all of our recommendations, or they sort of didn't agree with a number of them, which is quite unusual. But given the sort of fuel is always an attractive commodity, even before the massive price hikes that we've seen in recent times. So it's about control in a number of respects. But we will be doing again another follow-up on this particular area, and the committee may or may not choose to invite sort of management back in, depending on what we find when we do the follow-up piece of work. On the
Do you want to pause there before we move on to section
Yeah,
4?
yes, certainly. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I think I understand that there's not a standard practice, but where there are limited and no issues reports, the committee has the rights, powers, whatever you want to say, to call in staff managers to come and address us. And that's happened in a couple of these occasions. So it isn't a standard fare, I guess, because I think I see it written in for the vehicle fuel when I see it in mentioned for the property management. So I guess it hasn't happened on regards to the private funds.
No, it happens by request of the committee. Really, what we generally do, members will see the full reports. They get them as information reports directly. So they don't appear on the full agenda, but members see them. And then when we present those information reports, one of the standard recommendations is members consider whether they wish to invite service management to attend to account really for where they are on dealing with some of these recommendations. So it's very much on a sort of case by case basis and depending on what the committee feels, and also if we are able to give any assurance on progress that's been made as well. So it's that's why it's not necessarily a black and white sort of approach to things.
So just to check, Mark, you were saying there that the committee receive, effectively not to the committee, but just get emailed out all copies of all limited and no assurance audit reports? All
reports, not even just limited, all of them. So you get a sense of, generally what our work is covering and so on, and the format of the report. So we don't go through them in the meeting, but then if there's anything that members want to flag up for a future meeting, there's opportunity to request those things to come forward in more detail.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gibbs.
Thank you, Chair. Mark, can I just ask you, could you drill down a little bit further into the situation with the fuel? Because what was the reason for the pushback on that? And the reason why I'm asking this, a couple of years ago, I know we were having issues down in Unit 5. I think the recycling team were then. That people were breaking in and actually stealing fuel. So right. I'm a bit perplexed as to why they don't see it as you see it then.
Good question. I think there was a difference of view on certain things, and maybe not necessarily seeing the need for some of the controls that we felt would be wise to put in place. So obviously that they went through the recommendations and they had their say when they attended. I can't remember which committee it was now. It was a good few months ago, but there was a difference of opinion, and I know the auditor, well, Helen actually was the auditor who happens to be on in the meeting, and Lisa had follow-up meetings with the service on a number of occasions to go through the detail, so which is not usually required, but we went through and made the various points. But yeah, I can't really explain. I don't know if Helen's got anything to add to that, but the the service did come back, say where they were on things, and maybe when we do a follow-up, if things haven't been implemented, that might be a time to sort of ask them about specifics if and when some of these things haven't been implemented. The instance you mentioned about Unit 5, I can't honestly hand on heart say I remember that one. We have had issues in different ways with fuel over the years. People whether I'm going back many years now, where people inside sort of people, if you like, filling jerry cans and sort of selling those, if you like, and also fuel cards, similar thing being used, and fuel being put in jerry cans on a very small scale. But nevertheless, as I mentioned earlier, fuel is a very attractive commodity at the best of times, and even now, well, particularly now, given the price of fuel. So yeah, so it's something that's it's always been something that we need to keep an eye on for a number of reasons, really. So
yeah, okay. Lovely. Yeah, and as you say, fuel prices are at a premium these days. So goodness knows what has been sold on the black market, right? So just for clarity there, Mark, because like I say, I'm new to this committee. If you guys put a recommendation in, and you are strong believers that those recommendations need to be in, but the organisation and the actual managers are saying no, there's no need to it. What is what is the process? Who has ultimate say on what the recommendation is? I'm guessing it should be you guys.
Well, it's not. It's up to the organisation, really. It's back to Andrew's point earlier in terms of what level of risk the organisation is prepared to sort of accept or tolerate, because every control has got a cost, essentially. Because if you're asking people to do something, there is a cost in terms of time, potentially, in relation to that control. So what generally happens, I would say, 99% of recommendations we make are accepted. 99, 98% is a very, very high percentage anyway. And if there are things that, on concluding the audit, if we've made a recommendation that the service feels they don't agree with for whatever reason, we usually have the conversation. They explain their point of view, we explain ours, and then sometimes we say, yeah, fair point. Actually, we won't make that recommendation. We agree there's no need. And then, as in this case, we feel actually, no, there's a number of recommendations here that they will stay in the report, but they then have to say, well, why they don't believe that this recommendation should be implemented. So that goes into the action plan. So the service area taking responsibility for not implementing that recommendation. And then, as I said, then is an option then for the committee to ask the service to come in to say where they are. Whilst I don't think at that meeting that we went through every single recommendation and sort of accounted for every single one. Ultimately, I suppose the committee could say, well, we take the view one way or the other. We very rarely get into these situations, so it's very unusual to have this sort of situation. But we've just been honest, really, in terms of we've made a number of recommendations, but the service didn't accept a number of them. So everybody's aware of the situation.
It's good to know these are very, very few and far between. But likewise, it's also good the one has come to us now, so we can we can actually review the process. So basically, then I think from my understanding, if we as a committee feel those recommendations should stay and be implemented, then that can be read then, yeah.
Yeah, that point can be made back. Ultimately, it's a good hypothetical. Well, it's not a hypothetical; it's a real example. This one, isn't it? But it's ultimately it's for the organisation then to decide. So, in theory, management or a portfolio member could say, "Well, actually, no, we still disagree," or "No, actually, we do agree." So, service manager X implement this recommendation. So, we've got to be mindful. It's they run the services, they'll take responsibility, but it is unusual for services to disagree with a significant number of recommendations. But there we go. But yeah, we'll test out the process in due course. We'll do the follow-up, and it'll come back. We'll see what that shows, and then we'll see what happens there. So I can't ever recall it happening before, if I'm honest. So we'll see how it works.
Yeah, welcome to Merthyr. It's probably going to happen more often now.
It's really helpful to set out the escalation process, actually, Mark, because you're absolutely right. We're your advisors. And we can advise as well. If we are unhappy with them not to pick it up, we can say so as well. But ultimately, it is for sort of an escalation up to cabinet, I guess, and that's the process. That's really helpful, Mark. I think you were on your flow and you were just about to head into section 4, weren't you?
Yeah, just again, recommendations. We've already touched on this. We make recommendations, just how we prioritize them between high, medium and low priority. I think that pretty much speaks for itself. The low priorities are sort of perhaps best practice or things that, they should consider implementing, not things that we see as essential, if you like, but just to see how we categorize things. And then table 4 just gives the split then around the recommendations we have made around high, medium and low. So the majority are in the high and medium categories, with a relatively small number of low priority recommendations. One of the things I wanted to mention there is that is what we want to do when we adopted a new audit management software to manage the way we conduct audits and reports and so on, called MK Insight, and we took that on board when was it? well, just over a year ago, last April. So we've been using that now in anger for the last year. One of the things what we want to do is take advantage of the functionality around implementation of recommendations tracking, so we can report to the committee probably on a quarterly basis on implementation, so we can, as well as doing the follow-up pieces of work on the areas of limited assurance, we can give an indication of where services are on the implementation of recommendations. So that's something we want to develop using the functionality of the software. So just to flag that up. Yeah, counter fraud work. Unusually, we haven't got a huge amount to say about this year. Quite normally, in a normal year, if you like, we do get quite a number of referrals, so that we end up investigate certain potential fraud or things that we need to investigate. That's been very limited this year, which is, as I say, very unusual. That's not to say we haven't done any counter fraud related work. Historically, we've coordinated the National Fraud Initiative to make sure the data has been submitted to that exercise. We then allocate out the matches to the relevant service areas to go through in more detail. But we did identify about 225 potential frauds or errors. We have to use that phraseology because a fraud isn't a fraud until it's proven, and it can be just errors in the system or incorrect information has been recorded. But that identified approximately £28,000 worth of payments that shouldn't have been made, with £27,000 worth being recoverable. We updated a number of fraud-related policies during the year, and all of those, as well as going to this committee, have also been to full council for adoption. So the last two were adopted at the council meeting. Was it last week or the week before? I'm losing track of time. I think it was last week. And one of the things I'm very pleased about is that without going through a long history of this, we had quite a strong counter-fraud team in Merthyr Tydfil for a number of years. A lot of that work was benefits related. DWP, Department of Work and Pensions, made the decision to centralise benefit fraud investigation work. So they basically took that on in the DWP. So all fraud officers across England and Wales, I'm not sure about Scotland, probably Scotland as well, were given the opportunity, or if they wanted to transfer to DWP. That's basically happened in the majority of authorities. The odd fraud investigator remained in some authorities, but in Merthyr the whole team transferred over. So as a result of that, there was no dedicated counter-fraud staff. So that type of work was picked up by auditors as a sort of add-on to the planned work that they were doing, which wasn't really a sustainable way forward. There was a national piece of work done by Audit Wales in relation to fraud arrangements generally in local authorities and the public sector, and that was flagged up to be the case in a number of councils. So I'm pleased that the council recognised that and identified funding to create a post of a fraud investigator. She started probably 2 months ago, I think it is. She's employed by the Merthyr Tydfil, but we'll be sort of managing her, if you like, in close conjunction with the internal audit team. So she has wider support rather than being a sort of standalone person, but she is employed by Merthyr Tydfil. So she'll be picking up and helping to drive forward the fraud strategy and action plan. So we hope to come back to the committee in due course on progress that's been made there. So we're very much developing Nicole, that's her name, in developing that. And as I said, very pleased that that resource has been identified, and we've managed to recruit somebody who's very promising in terms of addressing counter-fraud work, but not work in isolation. It's very much around working with key services and also using our support and our networks across the regional internal audit service as well, because it's quite a challenging job, and it's not an easy thing to do in isolation. That's why it's important to work with others to undertake this role.
Thank you, Mark. That's really helpful by way of background, just to understand the background, because I was kind of wondering why we were recruiting now in Basel. That's really helpful. We've got a hand up at this point. I've got Councillor Claire Jones.
Yeah, basically, I was just gonna ask what Mark has just reiterated anyway and explained. So because I was wondering, when you were saying fraud, what were we actually including within the fraud? But when you say, so can I just have the understanding, you say DWP, so if somebody, that's benefit fraud, yeah?
Yeah.
So we're including council tax and any payments and.
Yeah. So Yeah, so historically, housing benefit, well, it's still housing benefit is still administered by councils, but as universal credit has come in, more and more that work has been done by DWP. But a number of years ago, the government decided that they were going to centralise that whole responsibility, whereas before, benefit fraud was being investigated both by councils and by DWP, and we had very good working relationships with DWP. We used to do joint investigations and formal interviews. People who have been prosecuted, and it was, local authorities were very successful at it. So that changed probably 5 or 6 years ago now. So that resource was lost pretty much overnight, and because of the budget pressures facing local authorities, it was a judgment call really. Can we afford to have a fraud officer in post or not, because it means identifying specific funds then for that purpose. But what we're hoping is, by investigating things like you mentioned, council tax, single persons discount, council tax reduction payments, because they're a cost. Whilst this money comes from Welsh Government, there's a cost to each local authority for council tax reduction if people are claiming things that they're not entitled. That has an impact on local authority budgets. It's a whole range of potential frauds out there. And National Fraud Initiative is the data matching exercise, where basically all data from a whole range of public sector organisations goes into the technical term into a melting pot and looks for potential matches and seeing where there's conflicting information. So and then that identifies potential areas for further investigation to see if we're actually either errors have been made. We've, for example, paid the same invoice twice, so that would be an error rather than a fraud, hopefully. Or there's people just provided us with inaccurate information, or there are people saying that they're eligible for single persons discount, but there's actually other information that says there's 2, 3, 4 people living at the premises. It's all that type of thing. So it's taking all of that forward. We've got a strategy and an action plan. It's about raising awareness. It's a whole range of things, but a key part of it is actual investigation and trying to identify where fraud is happening, so we can try and recover that as an organisation, and that hopefully will more than cover the costs of the fraud investigator as well. So does that? I'm not sure if that explains it.
No, it does, Matt. Thank you. I got to be honest. When you said that earlier on, I sort of that was quite interesting to listen to, because like Kevin stated earlier, I'm new to this as well. So you're saying things at the moment, and I'm trying to ingest everything. And it's really interesting. And then you're listening to things, and you've just said something like that then, and I was just like, oh, so that's, thank you. You've answered my question. But like I said, you would answer my question as you were going on. Oh, God. So I put my hand up, and I was a bit eager, I think, and then you carried on going. So thank you ever so much. That's really appreciated. Thank you.
No problem at all. No problem at all.
Eager members of the committee. That's excellent news.
There we go.
So just by way of covering off counter fraud, then I don't think I spotted it on the forward work plan. Would we get regular, whatever regular means, updates from in terms of what work's been done? Those kind of questions, like what sort of frauds and or error are we sort of seeing in the authority, and then what are we doing about them, and how are we closing those gaps, I guess.
The reason we haven't put it in is because obviously the person has not long, it was only the last couple of months started in the role, and we're trying to work out, okay, let's see what develops. We can give you an update on where we are in terms of the action plan, but it'll be early days. I don't know, off the top of my head, I'm thinking around Christmas time, January time, maybe we'll see where we are, what work's been done, what progress has been made. But the only thing I know from experience, having sort of set up the third counter fraud team in Merthyr back in probably, when was it? In 1990s, probably, early 90s. These investigations can be quite long-winded, so you might start something today. By the time they reach a conclusion, it can be 6 months or even a year down the line. So I want to be able to give an update to members, but it's having something sort of of substantial sort of substance, if you like, to come back to you on. So it's keeping a watching brief. I'm having regular meetings with the fraud officer to see how we progress in, and then bearing that in mind to give an update to the committee later on the year. So that's why it's not in there as a specific planned report then, if you like.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. We'll look forward to getting that in due course. I suspect she might have her hands full in terms of not having had a dedicated resource for a number of years. There might be some backlog things that she can go and investigate.
Yeah, well, to be honest, she's picking up the National Fraud Initiative work at the moment, and that's a big piece of work at the moment. So she's getting her head around how that all works, because he covers lots of different aspects of the authority and liaising with lots of different departments that she won't know the individual. So there's quite a lot of lead-in time really to get that. But I'm keen to come back to the committee as soon as we can, but at the right time to update you on progress really.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Section 6.
Okay, as part of the requirements of the standards that we're supposed to give an overview of performance of the team as well. So section 6 there and section 7 and 8 sort of touches on some of those things. Section 6 is about client satisfaction. So we issue a questionnaire after every audit to the service area that we've audited. There's the questions that we ask. So a good response rate in Merthyr, to be honest, better than many. So we had an 86% response rate to the questionnaires that we issued, which is good, and an overall 95% satisfaction rate, again, which is very, very high. But as well as that, there's obviously opportunity for people to make comments and so on. So they're just a selection of some of the comments that we've had. Generally, based on a 95% satisfaction rate, the comments are generally very, very positive. There's some good comments there about individual auditors, etc. And there's also one negative there, but I won't probably need to say much more about that based on our earlier conversation. So, but again, it's about being transparent and giving you both the positive and perhaps the not so positive. So yeah, section 7. Sorry. Section 7 is about staff training. Just give you a flavour of some of the training the staff have undergone during the year. Some of it is not, well, quite a bit of it isn't necessarily audit related. It's about having general awareness of things generally in the workplace and in local authority staff need to be aware of. Very keen on supporting professional development. We've had one person pass the Chartered Institute of Internal Auditors qualification, certified internal audit qualification. There's another member of staff started who's taking the exams currently, and we've had member of staff who's recently passed his SIPFA exams and become a full SIPFA qualified member. And we're currently recruited one trainee to start to train, and we're in the middle of recruiting another 2 as well. So that's also all part of trying to make the service more sustainable going forward, because unless we train our own staff, I think as most of the public sector, you'll struggle to recruit. So I'm keen to sort of develop that further, and we're on that very much on that road. And then section 8 reads, just to give a flavour, well, an acronym, WCAG, Welsh Chief Auditors Group, is basically the network of chief auditors across the local authorities in Wales. Developed some benchmarking PIs, if you like, a number of years ago, and these are the ones that we tend to report on. There's always a time lag, because by the time you collect data nationally, it's so we always give you the previous year's sort of comparative figures, but we give you the up-to-date figures for the authority. So these are the figures for the Merthyr, if you like, the Merthyr part of the service in relation to delivery of the plan. So, for example, there's 64% of the planned audits have been completed. It's a slight drop from the previous year when it was 66%, and the average across Wales was 67%. So it's close, but it has dipped slightly, which I'll talk about in a little while. And percentage of audit plans completed in planned time, that's dropped quite a bit. That can be down to it is down to a couple of audits taking much longer than planned for various reasons, and perhaps we've had a little bit of a discussion on one of those already. But that's something we're conscious that we need to try and improve on and manage, and part of the new structure that we've put in place is new management arrangements. We did have a vacancy in terms of the audit manager for a substantial part of last year, covering the Merthyr team, so we were covering quite a bit of that between us. But the new arrangements we've put in place, and using the new audit software that we've got to help manage people's time, I think we'll see that improve quite considerably. So it's a bit of a blip there, but it doesn't take many audits really to go over by even by a short number of days to affect that indicator. But it's just something that we keep an eye on to give committee an overview really of how things are going. But otherwise, it's the feedback from the satisfaction questionnaires, which are very positive, and the percentage of recommendations accepted. I mentioned earlier 95%, you know, as a sort of ballpark. Sometimes it's more than that, sometimes it's a bit less, but generally it's in the high 90%. So, okay, shall I pause there, Chair, or do you want me to move on?
We'll crack on, and when
Right.
we stop you, I'll stop you.
Okay, yeah, public sector internal audit standards. Yeah, we need to say as part of the standards we're compliant, so we are in compliance with the public sector internal audit standards. Every 5 years we have to have an external review that's planned for this year to make sure that from an independent point of view that that we are in compliance with the standards. There's over 300 standards that we need to comply with, so there's a lot there, a lot of detail as well that we need to demonstrate. So we do assess whether we do comply or not ourselves, but say the standards require us to do that externally or independently every 5 years. So there's been no substantial change. We've improved our working practices, and we've, as I mentioned, this audit software is more sophisticated, but it hasn't sort of affected our compliance. If anything, it's improved things. But we'll be coming back to the committee on the outcome of that exercise towards the end, or later on this year, or towards the end of the year. And then the last section there is regional internal audit service progress. I think I mentioned in the induction training that we ran a few weeks ago now that the internal audit service to Merthyr Tydfil is provided as part of a shared service, and so it's the regional internal audit service. It's hosted by the Vale of Glamorgan, and it provides internal audit to the Vale, Bridgend, Merthyr Tydfil and Rhondda Cynon Taf. It sets out there what our vision is and so on. It identifies some of our immediate priorities when the expanded service was set up, coming up for so just over 3 years ago now. We've pleased to say we were delivered on all those things. What was delayed was the restructure that was required because the service historically had a number of vacancies when it was set up, but because of COVID and sort of complications due to different terms and conditions from different sort of authorities, that took a little while to work through. But we implemented the restructure last year, so we've recruited a number of posts, as already mentioned about Lisa and Helen being appointed and promoted. So a number of internal promotions have been made, which is good thing. The only trouble with that is it doesn't increase your overall numbers. So then we've had to go out then to advertise the number of posts that have been, if you like, vacated as a result of promotion. So we're in the middle of doing that at the moment. So I'm hopeful, certainly by the latter half of this year, we'll have filled all our posts, says he, touching all the wood that he can find. But it is quite a challenging recruitment market generally for public sector staff, certainly professional staff, and a range of things at the moment. But we'll see how well we get on, and I'm certainly hopeful of being able to recruit some graduates to fill some training roles that I touched on earlier. I mentioned about the remote working, that's likely to continue, but staff will and are coming in to meet face to face with service colleagues as and when required, or for certain audits it is required, so that is being done. But predominantly people are working from home, but they are able to come into the office when they need to. We've got dedicated office in Merthyr Tydfil in the Civic Centre there, so staff can come in to a range of offices when needed. And perhaps the only other thing I was going to mention, one of the longer term plans is to develop a commercial approach for the service, to sell the internal audit service to other predominantly public sector or voluntary sector providers. So that's something that we can take forward once all the posts have filled. It didn't seem, well, it wasn't practical to try and address that when we had a number of vacancies. I think you've got to have a steady ship, make sure you're delivering everything that you wanted to deliver for your main customers first. That has to be the priority, and then look at the development aspect following on from there. But a draft sort of roadmap action plan has been developed anyway in readiness for us to take those things forward and explore those opportunities when we're ready to do so.
Thanks, Mark. A couple of things covered that. I couldn't see in any of the papers, and I don't think we specifically talked about it in the training, so it'd be helpful just to understand a little bit on whether this is a briefing you might need to do in terms of the whole scale of the regional internal audit service,
Right.
I
Okay.
don't know, for example, the numbers of staff that are dedicated to Merthyr,
Okay.
so to translate into audit days, because obviously from reading the papers, 19 assignments were done in the year, but there was quite a number, 15 or so, that weren't done. And I just wondered, some of that was COVID and pressures on the service and you pulled back from, but some of it, I guess, was you not having staff in post. I just wondered, we talk a little bit about that mix. So how many days do we actually, how many either days or people we have available to do audit Merthyr?
Yeah. Basically, each authority is sort of contract, if you like, for the want of a better word, or in terms of the legal agreement for X number of days per authority. I happen to be able to remember the Merthyr one is 938 days. So, so in terms of overall days, how we deliver that will vary. Up until recently, they were dedicated staff to undertake the Merthyr work, if you like, until the restructure came into place. But as that has come into place now, that those previously dedicated staff will be used across certainly 2 authorities and maybe used across a wider footprint as well. So you might have staff who've historically been based in Rhondda and Taff or in the Vale doing some work in Merthyr and vice versa, because there's some benefits and advantages to having the same auditor conducting the same audit across all 4 authorities, because they learn how things have been done, things become more efficient and so on. So basically, yeah, there's days that have been agreed in terms of broad terms. It also covers not only just audits. It's obviously support for things like the committee doing a lot of the annual reports. It's the overheads part as well, if you want to call it that, not just the opinion related work, and also responding to requests to do specific things that sometimes have to take priority over planned work. So that's the sort of broad. So 930 days roughly translates to, if my memory serves me correctly, about 4.5 staff thereabouts. But yeah, so we did have a longer term vacancy. We use swap if we need to buy in for certain audits, particularly if we got vacancies of this particular expertise that they may have that we don't in a particular field, for example. So some of it may be bought in, but the vast majority is delivered ourselves by the team. But who delivers it has evolved and will evolve over time in terms of taking staff from across the wider team. Yeah, does that sort of give you a flavour, Chair?
It does, Mark. That's really helpful. And I guess there's some sort of monitoring arrangements that says if Merthyr as an authority are buying X number of days, do we get X number of days delivered? And I presume there's a process in there.
Yeah, and basically if we're under delivering on days because of vacancies or whatever have you, then basically there's a certain amount of money then is refunded based on the cost per day. So nobody what's the word? Nobody doesn't get what they pay for, and if they paid for something that they haven't got, then that's refunded and so on. But generally, we've been there or thereabouts, a little bit under, but it's been there or thereabouts for Merthyr Tydfil.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Mark. I think we're on the home straight in this paper now.
Yes, and I won't repeat all of this, but basically Section 11 goes into more detail around the opinion side of things. So I've already given you the highlights when I went through the covering report, but we give an opinion on risk, governance and internal control, and then an overall an opinion, and we talk about what that's based on. But as you already know, we've given an opinion of reasonable assurance based on the work that we've undertaken and our knowledge of the authority and other assurance arrangements that have been in place. So hopefully that gives members a flavour of what we've done. Well, more than a flavour, this goes into quite a bit of detail of what we've done, and gives you assurance in terms of what it's all being based on. Thank you very much.
Mark, thank you. That's a very thorough going through that paper. I think we needed it particularly for the newbies this committee. As this committee matures, I'm sure we'll understand some of this stuff more at first glance, but it's really helpful. Is everyone content with that? The covering paper says the recommendation is to give due consideration. I think we did so. Just check, do I need to formally vote on due consideration?
No, I don't think so, Chair.
Okay, good. That's good. That's okay. I'll get the hang of it slowly. I'll get the hang of it. Okay, in that case, we'll move on to item 7, and I think it's Steve. Hi, Steve.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, item 7 is the audit inquiries to those charged with governance and management. And it basically accompanies the accounts report, which is the next report onwards. So Audit Wales, in its audit of the council's accounts for last year, they need to conduct the audit in accordance which is set out in the international standards of auditing. And as a result, they sought views then from myself and the chair of council, who was the mayor, last March, on just a number of issues impacting upon the audit of the accounts, which are relevant to both management and to those charged with governance. And those areas of governance are set out in paragraph 3.3 and are included in appendices 1 to 3. So appendix 1 is in relation to fraud. Appendix 2 is in respect of laws and regulations, and appendix 3 is in respect of related parties. So our responses, which are included in appendices 1 to 3, will assist Audit Wales in their work and support its work in just arriving at an audit opinion for the 21-22 accounts. So I don't plan to go through appendices 1 to 3, Chair, but if I stop there and ask if there are any questions.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I've recognised this from lots of other places. The obvious only question for me is, has anything changed in our responses from the? I presume they posed almost exactly the same questions last year, and how our responses changed, and if they have changed, is that for the better or for the worse?
Our responses are exactly the same, Chair, as last year.
Magic. That's
so there's
really
nothing changed at all.
Clearly, what we said last year was okay to Audit Wales, so I suspect these will be too. Okay, that circumvents everything. Questions for Steve? Okay, it's reasonably straightforward. Thank you. It's again, we are asked to note, so we do duly note that, and then we'll move on to the, as you said, that's the hors d'oeuvre before the main course. And the main course is the account itself, 150 something pages of them. So we'll go to you to please not go through page by page.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, and just then with this report is I'm not intending to go through the statement of accounts, so you'll be very, very happy about that. But I just do want to point out a few points. Is that the accounts and Audit Wales regulations are asking the just authorities to basically complete the accounts by the 31st of May. And then the accounts have to be audited by the 31st of July. But because of the pandemic, things are a little bit more flexible for last year. And so our target dates for completion of the accounts are the 31st of August. And then for the audit of the accounts and the reporting to council is the 30th of November. I'm just happy though to say that the accounts were completed in very good time, and I authorised the accounts on the 29th of June. And this would be a very good time as well for me, Chair, to thank Adele, who just heads up accountancy, and the rest of the accountancy team as well, and just for all their hard work over the last number of months. So you'll note that the actual statement of accounts themselves are attached as Appendix A. So this narrative report is an executive summary. And the plan is for Audit Wales to be able to sign off the accounts, and we'll go to council on the 9th of November. So a couple of parts in going through it is under paragraph 4, then it basically sets out that the statement of accounts have been compiled, and that has been in accordance with the code of practice on local authority accounting, the Service Reporting Code of Practice, and the International Financial Reporting Standards. So all those have been complied with. Then moving on to paragraph 5, that sets out then some of the jointly controlled operations, which we've had operations with other venturers, and our share has been included as part of the accounts, and that included in the actual figures themselves. So we've included our share at 46.6% of the Shoed Crematorium, 6.36% of the Central South Consortium, and 3.94% of the Cardiff Capital Region City deal. So set out in paragraph 6, it basically states that the audit has now commenced, and Audit Wales will be reporting their audit findings back then on the 24th of October. So that's when it'll be in front of this committee. Paragraph 7 is where we start to look at the actual outturn for last year. Under 7.1, it looks at our adjusted revenue outturn, and this was reported to Cabinet on the 6th of July. So as is evident there, we are currently showing a surplus for the year of nearly £3.7 million, and that's after we've transferred nearly £6.1 million into reserves, and those are into year-marked reserves. So outlined then in paragraph 7.1.1 are some of the underspends and overspends that we've had over the last year. So I won't go through any of those in any depth, but I would like to take you to under the contributions and recharges, and just to mention about the corporate vacancy factor. And this is the actual savings that we achieve when a post becomes vacant in the authority, and then when that appointment is made. We initially had a budget of £650,000, but we've actually outturned at nearly £1.6 million. So we've made a budget surplus of £939,000, and it does really reflect as well on perhaps we haven't been that successful in being able to recruit for certain posts.
Yeah, that's not necessarily good news, is it? Not necessarily good news that we've got vacancies. I mean, it's good that we've saved money, but it's bad that we haven't had the staff to do the jobs. Exactly,
yes, exactly. And I think that has become a common feature really across every authority in Wales over the last year. Another area I would like to concentrate a little bit on is where we've had further Welsh Government monies. And in fact, very, very late on in the year, in fact, it was around the February mark, we had further nearly £3.6 million of grant income. We had nearly £1.2 million of extra revenue support grant. And we were also successful in being able to claim for nearly £1.9 million worth of extra monies, and that was in respect of homelessness hardship fund monies for this current financial year. So we were able to claim from last year's hardship fund because we'd actually advanced booked for this financial year. We also had £407,000 worth of council tax monies, which was to assist us with some of the non-collection of council tax within last financial year. So all in all, that's quite a significant amount of further income that we had very, very late on in the year. Then I mentioned earlier that we'd basically been able to put nearly £6.1 million into earmarked reserves. So the table on the top of my page 10 includes the makeup of that £6.039 million. You will be able to see that there are quite a number of millions of pounds being put aside in social services. That's to help with the real living wage and also the social services winter pressures. And that homelessness monies and the council tax monies I mentioned earlier, those have also been put into a specific earmarked reserve. So then in looking at the remaining £3.671 million, there is a proposal then that £388,000 is transferred to general reserves. And that will then ensure that our general reserves will lie at 4% of our net revenue expenditure. And that's in compliance with our corporate reserves policy, which states that our general reserves should lie between 3.5 and 4% of our net revenue expenditure. So now we're at the upper level of that threshold. And we're proposing then that the remaining nearly £3.3 million gets placed into the budget reserve, and that is to assist us with our budget setting over the medium term. So that gives you a little snapshot of our revenue outturn.
Do you want to pause there?
Yeah, we'll do.
I see Councillor Claire Jones's hand up again. Claire, oh, there we are.
Can you, yeah, no, I'm here. Can you just bear with me one moment, because I just need to go back to the document. Steve, can I just ask you a question? You know, I don't know whether this is an appropriate one to ask, but or Chair, you can stop me at any point. You stated that there is the monies in support of the non-collection of council tax of 407,000. Obviously, I'd like to think that the money is being, you know, we are using companies to be able to retrieve the money. That money then goes back into the pot?
Yes, it's
have I got it wrong, Steve? Sorry.
No. It's what exactly has happened is that we've been given this money as a kind of and to assist us with any impact on cash flow.
Okay.
Because obviously with the amount of council tax that we do collect, our rate for last year was better than in 2021, but still it was less than what we did in 1920.
Okay.
So what the Welsh Government have done over the last couple of years is that I think they've found some more monies behind the couch somewhere, I think.
Yeah.
And so we've had some more monies and to assist us with that kind of cash flow. What we will be doing, obviously, is we'll still be sending out our summonses. We'll still be sending out all the reminder notices.
Yeah.
And we'll still be looking to just collect that income.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Steve. I really appreciate your answer. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
I guess if people haven't got the money, they haven't got the money, you know, when you can chase all you want. So that's the real hardship thing, isn't it? So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah. It's if I could add there as well, Martin, is that and the actual reason then why the £407,000 has been put back into a reserve is because obviously we are mindful of the fact that there could well be some write-off that we may have to fund in future years.
Yeah.
So at least then we've got that monies available.
Yeah, and just recognising your comment earlier about sort of putting money into budget reserves, and we fully understand that with cost of living pressures and pay inflation that might be looming large, and we talked about fuel costs already, haven't we? So I'm sure budget setting is going to get harder in the next couple of years. So having that reserve is hopefully going to help us along a little bit. Councillor Gibbs, be patient.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I noticed the chat is not available. I'm going to have to leave. My wife has just had a seizure. Sorry, so I do apologise.
That's
Oh, just
absolutely,
okay, Kevin. If you need anything, let us know.
Yeah, we'll do. Cheers,
Thank
cheers,
you.
guys. Bye.
that puts everything into perspective rather, doesn't it? But nevertheless, wow, okay. Where were we? Gone through the financial position. I think you would largely wrap that up unless you talk about capital before we move on, Steve.
Yeah, I just want to touch a little bit on capital there, Chair. Is that under 7.2, it states there that at the outturn for last financial year, is that was also reported to the Cabinet on July the 6th. And we've actually incurred expenditure of £31.4 million against our capital budget for the year of £31.9 million. That's very, very good. And some of the monies which we've underspent on can be carried forward as well into next financial year. So again, I won't go through the individual capital schemes from 7.2.1 onwards, but I want to touch on the financial position under 7.31, which sets out our general reserves. And as I stated earlier, really, that we've been able to put £388,000 now into general reserves, which ensures that it's at that 4% of our net revenue expenditure. And that means our general reserves are now at £5.723 million. So that wraps up the financial elements. So if I pause there and ask again if there are any questions either on the capital or on the or just on the reserves. You're just on mute, Chair.
Got me. I gave Councillor Jones time to put her hand up before I said let's move on.
Me again.
Well done, Councillor Jones. Good work.
I would just like to say, Steve, that earlier on when you stated about writing the report and you were early to submit, thank you. You know, I think you thanked your team, but I think I'd like to thank you on behalf of the councillors as well, because to be able to put something like that into place is fantastic, and to ensure that, you know, you've done that on behalf of the council, I think is amazing. So well done, and congratulations to your team for being able to submit it in before required. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think the whole committee would echo that. These accounts are becoming, or if they weren't already, they are unfeasibly complicated and growing ever longer. So trying to wade through the myriad complexities of accounting is not much fun, but clearly it's Steve, it's you and a good team behind you. So yeah, absolutely, I'd echo Councillor Jones's comments.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and the last element there really is the annual governance statement. And under the Accounts and Audit Wales regs again, it just requires that each local authority needs then and to just conduct a review at least once a year of the effectiveness of its system of internal control and the governance arrangements within its annual statement of accounts. So this is something we have to do by statute. And so we do have this annual governance statement in place. What I would like to say as well is that the annual governance statement also reflects the Council's responsibilities under the Well-being of Future Generations Wales Act 2015. And I would like to draw your attention to paragraph 8.5, which is the CIPFA, which is the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy. They launched the Financial Management Code of Practice back in November 2019, where local authorities had a trial run in 2021 and to comply with the Code of Practice, but then they had to basically fully comply in 21-22. And again, within our annual governance statement, we set out that we have fully complied with all 17 standards of the code. but it's like everything really, it is recognised that obviously we can further improve and to make sure that we do enhance our compliance in this current financial year. So the draft AGS is included as part of the statement of accounts, and that's attached at Appendix A. And under paragraph 8.8, I think as well, I should note that the assurance board has now stood down, and the last board meeting was held on the 16th of March. So the assurance board has now stood down. And just to finish off then, to basically say that the statement of accounts and the annual governance statement will be reviewed then as part of the audit, and that will be carried out then by just Audit Wales, will just be carrying that out. So if I stop there, Chair, and ask if there are any further questions.
Thank you, Steve. That's a pretty impressive feat to get to where we are. And just to understand the process from here on, I think the recommendation says recommend the AGS to Cabinet, but as it stands, it's a draft at the moment. So both the accounts and the AGS are in draft format. They actually get published now. Am I right in saying they get published on our website as a draft?
We don't normally until we've had the actual audit completed.
Okay.
And Council then has signed us off, and the actual audit has signed us off, and Council then have signed us off, which will probably be early November. So that's when we would normally put our draft accounts on, and just on our website.
So they'd be final at that stage, of course. Yeah.
Yes, they will. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Steve. I've got some small beer things, but I don't particularly want to delay the committee with it. For example, the risk register in here is the old risk register, which we've seen many times today, and things like that. And there's a few typos and things in there which are just going to challenge, but I'll pick those up outside the meeting. It's easier for us. So, committee, are we happy to accept the draft AGS and the draft annual accounts as they stand? Do they go to Audit Wales, or they've already gone to Audit Wales? I suspect there's not a linear process here, is it? And we'll receive them back here in October, and we'll have another bite at this cherry in terms of record. Then we'll recommend them to Cabinet for approval. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so we're happy to note the accounts and note where we are, and again to make that sort of.
Do you want to take a vote on that, Chair, on recommendation 2.1 and 2.2?
Okay, are we happy to do that? Councillor Davis, do you want to come in? Oh, well, we're just gonna vote in favour. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. So all in favour, put the hands.
Can I come in with them, please, Chair?
Sure, of course you can. Of course you
can. Just to give you a quick heads up, when you go to questions, you need to go to comments after. I know it's all new. Then people can question and then they can put a comment after, so it's like well done or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, really helpful. Thank you. Okay, so the recommendation.
Yes, sorry, Chair.
Go on.
No, I was going to say yes. It's recommendation 2.1 and 2.2.
Yes, so we'll take them. We'll take them as one. Are we happy to accept those two recommendations? Hands up, those in favour. Excellent. Okay, we'll
yes, get. Chair.
As I said earlier, we'll get the hang of this. Honestly. Okay, so we now got we skipped through the pages, and I now think we're on to the. We're back with Mark, I think, which is the annual internal audit strategy and plan. So I have to.
Thanks, Chair. I think it'll actually be myself taking members through this afternoon.
Excellent, Lisa.
Yeah, afternoon, everybody. Before I actually start to present the plan, can I firstly apologise for sending out something late this morning? Well, I noticed that in the agenda pack, one of our appendices wasn't in landscape, it was in portrait, so apologies for that, but we sent it out this morning just so that everyone would have a clearer view. So agenda item 9 is the annual internal audit strategy and the risk-based risk-based plan for 22-23. So in line with our public sector internal audit standards, the head of internal audit must establish a risk-based plan to determine the priorities of the internal audit activity consistent with the organisation's goals. So to develop the risk-based plan, the head of internal audit consults with senior management and develops an understanding of the organisation's strategies, the key business objectives and the risk management process. So in order for us to produce our annual internal audit draft plan, we take a number of different things into account. So we look at the corporate risk register, we look at the corporate plan, we look at key financial systems, we take into account any grant claims that require internal audit certification during the year. We factor in any follow-up reviews where previous reports have been given a limited or a no assurance audit opinion. We also issue questionnaires to heads of service just to ask them if they can see if there's any risks within their service areas, or if there's anywhere that audit would be able to perhaps come in and assist them or provide any assurance. We take into account any audit reviews from the previous year's audit plan that we've needed to carry forward. And we also have a discussion with the senior leadership team, including the Chief Executive, the Section 151 officer, and any other senior officers. And due to changes to the way the council has been operating since COVID-19, including any new risks as a result of remote working, we also consider those and include those in the draft plan where appropriate. So there are two attachments to this report. Attached at Appendix A is our draft internal audit strategy document. And this demonstrates how the internal audit service will be delivered and developed in accordance with our terms of reference. And then attached at Appendix B is our annual draft risk-based plan, which has been formulated in accordance with the public sector internal audit standards. And what members will note this year is that we've included the outline audit scope for each audit assignment, which is something new that we've never presented up to Governance and Audit Committee before. So we thought for consistency across the regional service, we would put, as well as the audit, we would put an outline narrative of the rationale for that piece of work being in the audit plan. And the COVID-19 pandemic has also meant that a lot of staff have worked remotely over the past 2 years. And this is likely to continue to a large extent with a bit hybrid working going forward. And the audit team will continue to work in this way, with some audits being undertaken remotely, some in person and some with a hybrid approach. But we'll be flexible depending on the audit and how best to achieve that piece of work and turn it around and conduct the audit with the auditee. The proposed plan will offer sufficient coverage for us to be able to provide an opinion at the end of 2022 and 23. And of course, the Governance and Audit Committee will receive updates throughout the year of how the plan is being delivered and any changes that may be required. So I'm happy to take any questions that members have on either the draft audit plan or the internal audit strategy.
Thank you, Lisa. That's a really helpful introduction. Again, understanding how the list is compiled is useful. Again, as a newbie, I've got Mark's annual report, so I've kind of seen the work that was done last year, and a number of those audits were deferred. And as pleasing as most, if not all, I didn't do a read across all here in this list. There's obviously some that didn't make the cut, and I get interested to know if there's sort of if some of these get pushed to defer because of service pressures, that you've got some sort of ready to go on the sort of didn't quite make the list.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. At the end of one financial year, and when we're starting another financial year, anything that is still perhaps at plan stage at the end from last year's plan, that's brought forward, and every single one of those audits is considered in conjunction with all the other, the risk registers, our meetings with directors, all our feedback questionnaires, and based on the discussion earlier, we have X number of days to complete the plan, and within those days, we'll take account of carry forwards, but it could be the case that another piece of work takes higher precedence, and then it's a case of looking at our audit universe and based on the days that we have, and then which of those audits are the greatest risk to the council and where we need to provide that assurance. So the majority of audits every single audit is carried forward and is included in that process, but potentially there might be one or two that are dropped as other ones take priority then in the subsequent year's plan. Yes.
And I guess the other part of it is something can come utterly from left field, which requires some of your work, and so you'll have to do some substitution as the year goes on.
Yes.
And, is there a process then of coming back to committee to, because if we're approving this, I guess in theory we should approve any changes to it?
Well, within the audit plan, we have an allocation of days for new and emerging risks. So there's something inbuilt into the plan, and I think in previous years, I think we would be naive to allocate all our days and not to be hit at some point in the year with a piece of work or some advice or guidance or something even on a consultancy basis. So I think that we've learned to incorporate some contingency within the plan to take account of any requests that come along throughout the year.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. That's really helpful to understand the work, and we look forward to receiving reports, I guess, every quarter, an update, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. Sue, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Lisa. Just on that same point, really, I just wondered if there was a rolling plan. So where those audits were dropped, maybe from the current year, would they be in a sort of 3-year plan and picked up as part of a sort of cyclical review process?
Well, the way that we work at the moment, we work on an annual basis. I think what we've found in recent years is that things change so quickly, and whilst we're aware of the audit universe, our audit plan is based on an annual basis rather than a 3-yearly cycle. So at this point in time next year, we wouldn't have a process whereby we would look specifically for those audits that have come forward from last year and dropped. It would just be a new position statement at that point in time, and whatever the risks were to the council at that point that we thought that we need to provide coverage on.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Lisa. I understand that you reassess it on that annual basis, and obviously there would be changes in those priorities.
Yes.
What the risk is, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lisa. Mark, I can see your hand up as well.
Yeah, just to add to that, really, I think things have gone in literally cycles over the years about having strategic plans over a 3 or 5 year cycle, and some schools have thought not to have a fixed plan at all. Some people say, oh, well, you just sort of do it on a quarterly basis and see what emerges. I'm still very much in the camp that you do need a plan, and it's not necessarily cast in stone, but there is a formal plan there that the committee looks at, and the committee gets feedback in terms of progress that has been made, and if there's significant changes, then the committee's kept up to date. So yeah. But the strategic way in terms of having a sort of 3 or 5 year, that hasn't happened the last few years, but it doesn't mean to say that that won't change over time either. It's sort of, views changed, don't they, over the years, and different schools of thought. There's so much more emphasis now based on the organisation's risks as well, in terms of the corporate risks and the significant risks and things changing as well. And okay, COVID is it a good example or a bad example? But COVID was a good example where we had to really reevaluate, and we did our plans. Our plans were ready to be agreed. COVID hit, and we had to completely almost throw the plans out the window and come up with something almost completely different, as it were. So that's taught us you have to be dynamic, really, and respond to things as they evolve. But still having a plan and reporting on the progress against that plan. And if there's anything significant, that we would flag that up to committee. Anything new. But we have got a contingency of days, a small contingency, I hasten to add, to sort of deal with things if needed.
Thanks. And just on that COVID point, Lisa, you mentioned the sort of hybrid working arrangements. There is something undeniably good about auditors actually walking up to somebody and says, can you tell me about, and seeing the panic in their eyes. You can't do that via email, can you? So, I mean, where necessary, you do go and sort of visit staff and ask some of those questions face to face, because giving people a couple of days to respond to an email is slightly different to sort of getting an instant reaction. You know whether you're onto something or not straight away, then, don't you?
Absolutely, and I think, you know, one of the things that we've noticed with remote working is, whereas if we were out and about, we might say, show us where these records are, so we could go pick the records up and then pick our sample. Whereas with remote working, you're reliant on, you know, the person that you're auditing providing you with information. And then, you know, there's a time delay then as well. So I think hybrid, you know, perhaps is the way that we can work this year, as in, you know, a meeting remotely, we can collect the information in person, work on it remotely. So there's a hybrid approach which suits everyone.
Yeah, the mix works absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see any other hands up. So the recommendation asks us to approve the internal audit strategy and plan. If we're all happy to do so, can we please raise our hands? Excellent, thank you. That looks like that's carried.
This is carried, Chair.
Thank you. Allied to the plan, item 10 is the internal audit charter. Do we stay with you, Lisa?
Staying with me for this one also, Chair, yes. So I'll be presenting the internal audit charter for 22-23. So the internal audit charter is a formal document, and it defines the purpose, the authority and the responsibility of internal audit activities. The charter establishes internal audit's position within the organisation. It authorises access to records, personnel and physical properties relevant to internal audit activities. The Regional Internal Audit Service Charter defines the responsibility across all 4 councils served by the regional service, and it was fully reviewed back in 2020-21 so that we would have a consistent charter for the 4 partner councils, and it is consistent with the objectives of the regional shared service, that is to eliminate duplication and to apply best practice. So the head of internal audit is responsible for reviewing the charter and presenting it to each governance and audit committee annually for approval, which is in line with the public sector internal audit standards, which are applicable to all UK public sector bodies. And the service is committed to meeting the standards laid down. The Regional Audit Service is committed to meeting the standards set out in the public sector standards, and any deviations from this will be reported to Governance and Audit Committee. So the charter is split into 4 sections: purpose, authority, responsibility, independence and objectivity, proficiency and due professional care, and a quality assurance and improvement programme. And I think it's important to mention that you know, this is a document which is reviewed annually, and when reviewing the charter for 22-23, it still meets the requirements of the Internal Audit Service, and no changes were found necessary other than the change of designation of Managing Director to Chief Executive at the Vale of Glamorgan Council, as the Vale are the host authority for the shared service. So that's basically an outline of the internal audit charter. So again, I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has on the contents.
Thank you, Lisa. That's very comprehensive. And again, noting it has been reviewed pretty thoroughly in recent years, and noting there were absolutely no changes from last year to this other than job titles, effectively. It's helpful to have this annual review, just so make sure we understand your kind of terms of reference effectively, so we know how you operate. I think it's really helpful. I suspect this will be a short conversation, given that there aren't any changes. But are there any questions for Lisa? Okay, I see no action, no takers there. So again, we're asked to approve the internal audit charter, and if we are happy to do so, will we please raise our hands in the usual fashion? Okay, again, I see that's comfortably carried. Thank you. We're heading on the home straight, and the next piece of work is something we need to keep track of as a committee, and it's the Governance and Audit Committee's forward work programme for the year, and Mark's already alluded to this in part. So, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, the committee will have this report every meeting, because it's useful for the committee to have a forward look at what's due to come over the forthcoming months. So it sets out the background there in the covering report that flags up some of the key issues or key things that the committee needs to keep an eye on. So we've based the forward work programme on basically last year's and any changes that we need to make. There's a number of items coming up at the next meeting, being brought by our colleagues in Audit Wales. You'll see there that's on the table under paragraph 4.2. But in addition, as the chair mentioned, I referred to it, the appendix 1 sets out the items that we plan to bring, or is planned to be brought to the committee. Risk I mentioned earlier in the first report, update on corporate risk. So we probably have a conversation, and Andrew, with the chair in terms of the timelines for that. But at least you can see what's planned to be brought and when. There is some flexibility for some things, but some things we have to say with the accounts, for example, have to come at a particular time. So Steve mentioned that when the accounts are planned to go to full council, so they'll need to come to the Governance and Audit Committee, for example, in October. But there's flexibility around certain things. The one today there really is the sort of key one. This is when we've got least flexibility over the timing of things. Today's sort of meeting, and obviously because the elections, things have been pushed back slightly, so it's been a longer agenda than perhaps we would normally have. Just to sort of, hopefully we haven't put everybody off. We're having such a long meeting, because they're not usually quite as long as this. But I think we've gone through the agenda fairly quickly. But as I say, there's opportunities to amend this, and sometimes things have to be changed because of practical sort of issues like availabilities of key people and so on. But it gives an outline of what's planned to be brought and when, and it'll no doubt be adjusted as the year goes on.
Mark, Lisa, thank you. It's really helpful to have that plan. I suspect it's a starting point. I think there's probably a few things I've just want to check on. Firstly, on the governance section of the appendix, the first little bundle, the bottom line of that says self-evaluation report. Is that the document that was referred to in terms of the authority's performance report, or are you talking about the committee's self-assessment report?
Right. I'm almost sure, says he, hesitating. That's the performance report for the authority. I can see if Andrew's on the, is Andrew still on the call?
Yes, I'm still here, Mark.
Yeah, is that one, Andrew?
Yeah, I believe the terminology needs to be changed to self-assessment report.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So it is the overall performance of the authority's report, and the terminology is all changed due to the Local Government Elections Act. So maybe, as Andrew said, we need to update that description.
It's kind of that's the one thing that kind of threw me, because I was wondering whether, and again, understanding the previous iterations of this committee, does this committee do a kind of self-evaluation? Does Merthyr do that across committees as a whole? Or do committees do an annual kind of report on their work?
Perhaps Andrew can answer it better than me. It certainly happened for scrutiny committees. It hasn't happened for the Governance and Audit Committee. So I think that's something that would be good practice to introduce. One of the things that we did touch on in the induction, and we haven't put it there, is issuing a questionnaire to members really around their skills and experience, so we can inform the sort of training, ongoing training program for the rest of the year. So we have a more in-depth session on external audit, for example, and on other topics like internal audit or risk management or treasury management, all sorts of things. So that's something that actually, you've spotted there, Chair, that needs to be added, and probably the autumn would be a sensible time to sort of fit that in, issue a questionnaire sooner rather than later, and then we can feed back the results of that to the members, and with a draft sort of an outline of a further training program to be held, whether it's the first item of a few committees going forward. That's the way some authorities do it, rather than trying to find another slot in the diary, as long as the agenda, whichever meeting that we select or meetings, as long as there's not too many items on those particular agendas already, for example.
Okay, it's a really helpful document. We are formally asked to approve. I think that's okay. So noting that it's clearly subject to change, because it'll flex as we go on, and as I give this some more thought in the days, weeks to months to come, and any other members as well who have any ideas of things that perhaps they think might be on there. One thing which would really inform that thinking about what should be on there, shouldn't be on there, does this committee have a formal terms of reference?
Yes, Chair. If you recall, when we did the induction, I put a link on to the particular report that went to full council, because things would change as a result of the Local Government Elections Act, but I can recirculate that link if that would be helpful.
Whether that's disappeared because it might have been in some sort of chat thing. So yes, if you can email
Yeah.
out,
Yeah, it was
helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, it was in the PowerPoint. It was Chair. It was one of the slides there, but I can certainly send the link back out again. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, really helpful. Thank you, Mark. Andrew, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just a point of correction, Chair. I think you alluded to it with Steve's report regarding one of the performance risks. The difference in the risk. I don't know whether I bring it up here. I'll wait for this item to come over, and then I'll come in at the end then, just to clarify a point.
Okay. Well, let's wrap this one up then. Noting that it's a point in time, and no doubt the forward work plan will develop as we give it further thought. Are we happy to approve the forward work program as it currently stands? And we'll do that by show of hands. Excellent. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, my hand is stuck at the moment. I can't get it to raise up.
We won't mark you down as a minority report. That's okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Wherever CJ, but
Okay, that's item 11. Item 12 is reflection evaluation, and it says to receive an update from the chair. Yikes. Okay. There's an awful lot to learn here, and there's a lot of stuff going on, and we've had a fairly brutal induction, I think, to the committee today for those people who are sitting here for the first time when it's however many 100 pages of paperwork. So good work in getting through it, and I'm just wondering whether perhaps, Mark, if you're the person who owns the agenda setting process, perhaps you and I need to sit down and have a conversation ahead of time just so we get that better agreed. We can take that offline anyway. So thank you. Thank you for making me most welcome and really helpful. Thank you. I'll bring Councillor Davis in before I'll pick up Andrew's point.
yeah, just before we go, Chair, it's like, that's all I'd say. When I was on the last committee, I was on it for 4 years, yeah?
Yeah.
So it's been a breath of fresh air today, if you know what I mean, with you chairing it, not anything like that. That's all I'd say. If you have meetings with people, can you make sure we all know about it on audit? If you have meetings with Welsh Government as a chair, can we have a feedback on what happened at the meetings, what you talked about? Because obviously this wasn't come back to us before.
Yeah, well, all I'm thinking about is that's what's the word, triangulation, I guess, between the terms of reference and the forward work plan, and thinking about what are the things that need to come in here. And there are some things which are brand new to the committee, such as that the authority's self-performance self-assessment report, and that's quite a substantial document when that arrives, I'm sure. So we'll just make sure the right things land in the right meetings, really. So it's nothing about sort of untoward other than just agenda setting, but absolutely, Councillor Davis will make sure that everyone's fully in the loop.
No, it's not. It's not that, Chair. Obviously, it's not. You knew when and that's what I said. It's like a breath of fresh air with it. You're involved in people, but obviously the last Chair, and it's not his fault because he's probably tied by council restraints, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Obviously, when I first joined the committee, he had a meeting with Welsh Audit, and none of the committee were allowed in there. We never had no feedback from what happened with that meeting with the chair, with Welsh Audit.
Okay, that won't be happening. So they will absolutely promise that there'll be openness and transparency with everything we do here. So yes, thanks for the heads up. And again, we rely on experience of people who are long-standing committee members as well to keep us newbies on the street and narrow. So thank you for that.
No, thank you.
I'm sorry, Andrew. You said you wanted to come back at the end of the meeting, didn't you?
Yes, yeah. Just a point of clarity on the first report, Chair. There was an error in the report regarding the performance risk score. That has remained the same at risk score 20 instead of 15, as stated in the report. So the committee was right to raise that as an error, and we'll correct that before it's presented to Cabinet. But provided the committee are happy, I don't think it has any impact on the recommendations put forward.
Very happy with that clarification, as long as we can make sure we capture that in the minutes. Which is a very neat segue to my last question. Was really, I noticed that the minutes of this meeting don't come back to this meeting for approval, but on the other hand, I think they probably need to come back to this meeting for accuracy, because if they disappear into the council system, then I'll never see them, and that seems bizarre that I'm chairing a committee and I won't see the minutes of the meeting I chair. So if they come back as a matter of course to the next meeting, just for accuracy, just so we can see that things have been properly captured, and that will help us.
I agree with that, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, if we can just make sure that that happens, and I don't know, again, understanding local authorities and police, different organisations do things in a different way, whether we actually capture actions in some sort of action log. If we decide to summon somebody, make sure there's a log that says we did that, and when it's discharged, it'll formally get discharged. Is that something that we normally do as standard business? I look to committee officials to see if that's something we could normally do.
Perhaps I can answer that one, Chair.
Go ahead.
It's basically, we haven't had a formal action plan. I've covered some authorities where there is a formal action plan. The trouble is they sometimes duplicate sort of the minutes then, where the minutes go back to those committees. So I think I did raise that point with the head of democratic services actually, and it's to do with the way the authority works. They took a decision that minutes go back to full council for approval, but I think there are ways and means of the minutes still coming back for information. It was a conscious sort of decision, I think, about the way the council wanted to operate going forward, but I think it is useful for the committee to see the minutes at the next meeting. So I think if the correct information is in the minutes, it'll help rather than have something else, another document that has to be updated. So maybe see how that goes, Chair, if we can facilitate that with colleagues in democratic services, and we see how that works. My suggestion.
I can remember that, Mark.
Beg your pardon?
I can remember that, please. I think the best thing to do with it is you send us an email with the minutes, yeah, which don't take long, yeah. We can have a quick flick through it, and then if we do disagree with something, then we can get it changed before it goes to full council. So just as a committee, send an email with the minutes, and then if there's anything you disagree on, you can check it, and then if it's wrong, then we can get it changed before it even goes to full council. So we don't have to do it on full council all the time, yeah.
I'm happy not to wade into the mechanics of good governance in Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council. I would happily leave that for democratic services. If you can take that away, I tend to agree with Councillor Davis, but if processes have been set up in a particular way, I don't want to be the one who sort of throws the fly in the ointment. But there are
no, I don't want to throw the fly in the ointment. What I mean is, follow on from what you said, Chair, where you said about minutes coming back to us, yeah. Obviously, we can just like you go on mod.gov, whatever, yeah. They can get sent to us that way. So when you can have a quick check of it, and then it goes to full council and it gets passed. Because anything that was wrong in it, we've already corrected before it went to full council, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, perhaps without prolonging it, Chair, perhaps we can take that away, as you say, and have a conversation with democratic service. Obviously, we need to be consistent across the authority needs to be consistent. What certainly historically has happened is that draft minutes are shared with the relevant officers to make sure that they reflect their sort of recollection of the meeting and so on, and then they go to full council. Maybe the scope for sharing that with the chair, possibly that happens in some places. It doesn't generally get shared with a wider committee, because otherwise you're in a sort of bit of a paper chase sometimes with a range of people. But I obviously we can have conversations with democratic services around that, and then obviously get the minutes back to the committee. So it's a way of keeping track of what was decided and what was agreed and so on. But that's a matter for democratic services more than me. I'm probably sticking my nose in now into things I shouldn't as well.
Well, I don't mean in that way. I don't do any extra work for people, Mark, innit? But just send us an email as a committee members, because there's only a few of us on there, and say these are the minutes. Is there anything you disagree with in the email? Email us back and we'll get it changed where it's not tedious all the time, yeah? Okay. You can't keep trying to look at the minutes and try and change things on meetings when you don't have to.
Well, let's task the officials. Sorry, Councillor Davis, I want to speak for us. I said let's count the officials with going away, having a chat with democratic services and seeing what we come up with. The worst case scenario is they come back to this committee just for checking accuracy of information, if not for approval. Okay, excellent. We've got through it. I have no idea how long audit committees usually last, but once you get past 2 and a bit hours, the attention spans start to waver. So thank you for your forbearance. And our next meeting, according to the forward work plan, is the 19th of September. I presume 2 p.m. in the same place, but we'll still be doing them virtually, I guess. Although it'd be nice to actually meet some of you guys. So you never know. Perhaps we will do it face to face one of these days. Excellent. Thank you, folks. Have a good afternoon. I hope you keep cool.